A good NRL fantasy coach knows when to remember and when to forget. And round two, well, it was one to forget. So let's look forward to round three here with the unique pods, cash cows, traps, holds, and sells for the week as we run through this 5x5. First up, the pods. So these are the guys with below 10% ownership. They're guys in this list below 6% ownership, but we're going to run through these guys. So Jahrome Hughes is the first one here. He averages an enormous score without Cam Munster. He's only 6% owned. He versus the Titans this week as well, who were carved up by the Dragons last week. So Jahrome Hughes, no Munster, no Pappenhausen. He gets a few weapons back in Olam, Kamitha, Tarek Sims as well. He's a guy that you can reach for, and he's only $704,000 too. So really good value there compared to some of the $900,000 option in the halves. He's definitely my favorite choice if you're going cheaper than, say, a Daly Cherry Evans. Next guy up here is Lindsay Collins, only 2% owned, and he had a pretty good performance last week. He only scored 46 points, but he did play 77 minutes in a game that was a bit of a mess for fantasy. So read into that what you will. They do get Victor Radley and Jared Hargraves back this week, but Lindsay Collins is a guy that I reckon will average between 50 and sort of the high 50s this year. I would not be shocked at all if he was averaging sort of 53, 54, 55, and he's about 10 points, 15 points underpriced still at $584,000. So really affordable. Next guy here, Tohu Harris, 6% owned, only about $750,000 right now. He's a gun you can reach for. He's in a similar area to Pat Carrigan, who's another great one to take as well. But Tohu Harris has been playing massive minutes. It doesn't also hurt that Jackson Ford is out this week. So we see Mitch Barnett slide into that starting spot and probably even more minute security there for Tohu Harris. So grab him if you can. There's not too much else to say there. Jacob Kiraz, spicy one. He's $636,000. He's about 1% owned. The question with Kiraz isn't necessarily on his capabilities. So you know he's going to run the ball. You know he's going to offload. You know he's going to finish the tries that he set up. But the question with Kiraz is, do you back the Bulldogs? So if you're buying Kiraz at $636,000, what you're saying is that you think the Bulldogs' attack will be good enough to get them into that top 8 this year. And for me, I'm still a bit iffy on the Dogs in terms of their general shape, their attack, the spine they have right now. So I'm probably not going to get Kiraz, but that could be proven wrong with another good performance this week. And it's definitely helped by the fact that they versus the Tigers this week, who are missing Papali and a couple of other players there too. So Kiraz is interesting. I mean, Kiraz is a guy where 1% ownership, there's not a lot of serious teams that have Kiraz. You could make massive inroads on the leaders if you got Kiraz, but you could also blow your team up. So that's why he's in the pods, 1% owned. Take a gamble if you want to. Let me know if you do in the comments. The last guy here is Jack Bird, much safer from a points perspective, a little bit dodgy in terms of injuries, but only 2% owned. He had his buy in round one. He scored 52 last week without doing anything too special in that game. If he's playing at lock, he's just going to play big minutes and make a lot of tackles and get his hands on the ball a ton. So Jack Bird, you can pretty much rely on him at center to average around 50, maybe even above 50 there. And at center, that's an absolute goldmine because we've seen so many dodgy scores from our centers. You know, if you started Tommy Talau last week against the Titans, you'd probably be thinking he could score a few points. He got you 2 points. We saw alamoti in round one score about 18 points. There's not a lot of security at center unless you went for the top line guys. So Jack Bird is a sneaky pod you can grab just to lock down your center spots. Next section here, we got the cash cows. 5 key guys that are going to make you some cash. And these are my favorite 5. There are a couple of others you could look at, but here they are. So first up, Jacob Preston. He's a guy we're talking about a lot. He looks pretty locked in to a spot at the Dogs. His role has been increasing each week, and he's named to start again this week. The question you could ask there is whether Tevita Pangai Jr. is going to impact him. Now, I think Tevita Pangai Jr. is going to be used as a bench middle forward. He's coming from an injury that has a pretty high re-aggravation rate too. So I think limited minutes for Pangai Jr. He'll come into the middle. He'll probably eat some minutes from guys like Ryan Sutton, and they really have been lacking those middle forwards as well, with Farmanu Brown playing a lot of minutes at lock too. So I don't think Pangai's going to be a problem. I think Preston's going to get the opportunity here to shine, and at $287,000 and with such a big score last week, he's going to make you cash. Next guy here is Paul Alamoti. Look, most people have him. Some people didn't. So at $265K, go grab Alamoti. His involvement was way bigger last week, and again, they've got the Tigers this week who are looking really soft. Next guy here is Hayze Perham. Hayze at $332K. much more involved game. Scored about 42 points last week. Again, a much easier game against the Tigers. He's a starting fullback, and the Dogs are looking like they're hitting their strides, so he'll probably keep that spot as long as they keep looking good. And again, soft fixture. Fourth up here, we got Matt Doorey at 294K. Now, if you don't have Doorey and you're looking for someone under 200K, you can be confident that Doorey's going to get the minutes. I've heard a bit from the para camp and just in general in the media that Matt Doorey is the preferred guy, and that they want to build Matt Doorey up to playing 80 minutes as well. So there's a lot of talk that it'd be Doorey on one edge, Sean Lane on the other edge, Cardi as an impact off the bench, and then Ryan Madison playing that middle role off the bench as well. So yeah, Matt Doorey, 294K. His score's been a bit underwhelming, but if you have some of these other guys already, I'd probably preference the top three there over him, then Matt Doorey is a guy you can grab as a cash out there. And last guy here is Tyrell Sloan. Really, really want to caveat this one with the fact that Sloan is very unreliable for fantasy. He doesn't have a great base. You're relying on attacking stats with him or some sort of leap from him over the offseason that we haven't seen yet. Sloan's try assist this week, where it was early in the game and he went straight through the middle and set up his inside man there. That was a tough run that we hadn't seen from Sloan previously. So previously we've been seeing a lot more try involvements off support running from Sloan, whereas that was just an individual run where he just took on the line with aggression, and that could signal a change for Sloan. So we might see a different Sloan. I'm putting him in here. He is my fifth option, and if I was choosing between him and Hayze Perham, I'd probably go Perham. I think Perham's just got a lot more involvement, ball in hand, 7 tackle breaks last week. But if you've got all these guys and you're just looking for someone here, Sloan is a dice roll. I'm not going to make the roll yet. I'd like to see another week. And they've got the Broncos too, so you wouldn't be starting him against the Broncos either. Up here, we have the traps. So we've looked at the hot options there, the guys I want to grab, and now we're looking at some traps. Now, Cartwright was in our cash cows last week. He gained about $50,000 over the week. He's looking likely to gain more money here, but if you don't have Cartwright at this point, at $362,000, using a trade to get him and using a trade to get rid of him, you probably want him to increase about $150K to justify those two trades. So you're looking at maybe $512,000 you need him to get to. There's a very real chance, and I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but there's a very real chance that Ryan Madison comes in and starts on an edge straight away. And there's a lot of talk that Doorey's preferred over Cartwright. So we could see a situation where Cartwright is out of the team in the next fortnight. That's the risk with Cartwright. At $362,000, you can't afford to take that risk. So I wouldn't be making that move. He's a big trap right now if you don't have him. If you do have him, I have him, a lot of people do have him, then keep riding it until he dies and then trade him out at $450,000, something like that, I reckon. Trindall's the next guy here, 322K. Nico Hines is back in round 4. Don't buy Trindall. It's really that simple. Trindall's a great player. In terms of like backup halves, he's one of the best in the game, I think. But at 322K, your upside's really limited because Nico's back in 2 weeks. So don't do that. Michael chee-kam next. The myth, if you're a long-term fantasy player, you've had this guy every year, and this has been the most solid he's looked at any point in his career in terms of fantasy appetite. But at 338K, I think there's just better guys you can get. The previous guys we were talking about, guys with more security, and there's just a few South players coming back now where I'm not confident chee-kam's going to keep that spot, and he's definitely behind Cam Murray and Kaloa Matangi in that back row. So I would steer clear of chee-kam, but look, it could work for you. Next up, Wayde Egan. He's 652K, and there's a lot of people talking about him as an option over some of the top flight hookers. So he scored tries in both games this year. He's a good player, but if you can get Reed Marnie for $60,000 more, I think you go for Reed. And this is a bit of a dog's flavor coming through here, but Reed's just a lot more solid in terms of his defensive work rate. And I think across his career is offensive creativity. Saying that, if you were backing Wayde, you're probably backing the Warriors forward pack to produce for him and for him to sort of convert there. I just don't think you go for him. You go for Reed for $60,000 more. So Reed's about $712,000. Or you take someone like Damien Cook or Harry Grant at that 900,000 point, but I don't think it's worth going below Reed at 712,000. So stick with Reed. I wouldn't touch Egan. Last guy here is Saulo. So he's a guy that I started with in a couple of leagues. He's done pretty well, but there's not a lot of a chance that he's going to keep minutes long term. $316,000. You got Josh Papali'i back. You've got Emre Gula eating up minutes too. He's getting the start here and there, so you could be fooled into thinking that he's high in the pecking order, but I think he's a guy that might slide off in terms of minutes when they're at full strength. So don't bring him in at 316,000. It's just not the option there. Next up, holds. And there's a bit of controversy here as we go through. So these probably are the guys that you're a bit frustrated with, the guys that you're looking to rage out. And to be honest, if you trade any of these guys out, there are situations where it makes sense. So I'm not saying they're absolute holds, but they're guys that I'm thinking about holding here. So first up, we've got Khan-Pereira, Katoa, and Warbrick. Really all because they're 220, 236, 270,000. They're too cheap to justify making a trade on. Khan-Pereira has been absolutely dreadful. And if you were tricked into starting with him based on the tries he scored in the trials, which I was in some teams, not in all teams, but he was a filler for a few of my teams, then you're kind of stuck with him and you're kind of hoping that he spikes at some point and has some big games. Like, think about owning Edric Lee in previous years where he popped off for a bit, but then went back to being a 10-point-a-game scorer. So Khan-Pereira, you're stuck with him. Just hold on to him unless you've got something crazy to do. Isaiya Katoa, 236K. He scored really lowly in the first game. He got 30 last week. Hold on to him. He's a half. They're a pretty good team. Right now, the Dolphins. Probably don't start him. Yeah, I wouldn't be starting him at any point, but yeah. And then Warbrick is the most exciting of the three there. Warbrick is a winger on the Storm versus the Titans this week. That's kind of all I've got to say. I think he got a 30 last week. It's probably not too long before he starts scoring some tries. He isn't helped by Munster being out, but Warbrick's a guy where you just need to hold on to him. Just stick him on your bench, start him if you're desperate. I think he's going to be pretty solid, and I think he's going to grow into a pretty good fantasy contributor. And I think there's going to be a point where a lot of people sell off him before he has a second kick and really put some form together. So stick with Warbrick for as long as you can. He's not the guy to be selling to free up $50,000. The next two here are really controversial. And again, I'm really reiterating, there are situations where you can trade these guys out, and I'm not going to judge you. But James Tedesco first. So you've picked Tedesco at the start of the year. You've probably picked him because you think the Roosters are going to be really good this year. The Roosters haven't been really good this year. I mean, they haven't been the worst. They're 1-1, but they haven't been the team that we expected. You look at this week's game and you think, oh, right, they've got Souths this week, they've got the Rabbitohs, and then they've got a bye next week. It's not looking great, but I think you have to make a call right now on Tedesco. So you either don't want Tedesco in general, or you're sticking with him reasonably long term and maybe reevaluating at the Origin buys, which start around 12, around 13. Personally, I'm sticking with Tedesco. I'm sticking with the Roosters here, and I think Tedesco will get it together. I think they'll take some time over the bye. They'll sort of reevaluate their attack, and he'll just be a lot more involved in much better ways. The other thing is they've got Victor Radley coming back and Jahrome Hargreaves coming back this week too. So, their ball play relies on Radley a ton, and their go forward relies on those two guys both. So Tedesco for me is a hold, but if you trade Tedesco, that's fine. Just don't be rage trading him back in really soon. Make a commitment. So make the call on Tedesco and the Roosters and what you're going to do there. Last guy here is Matt Burton. This one's really frustrating because I own shares in Burton in a lot of leagues, and he's been super uninvolved as far as fantasy goes compared to how he was at the back end of last year. The Dogs are still piecing together their attack. That's what I'm going to say. So there's a lot of new pieces that we were talking about there. Preston came in. We're talking about alamoti. We're talking about Hayze Perham. We're talking about, Flanagan being a bit unreliable. Reid Marnie is there. Their whole middle forward rotation sort of went off the boiler a bit, as in Luke Thompson, Tavita Pangai, Paul Vaughan, Josh Jackson, all those guys gone from last year's team as far as the start of this year goes. So I just think Burton's got a bit in him. I think you're going to be buying Burton back if you sell him. And you're going to be buying him. He'll dip down to maybe, if things go badly, maybe 550K kind of thing. I don't see him going that much below the mid 500s. And then he'll have a big game at some point and he'll jump up to sort of those mid to high 500s. And then you'll be buying him back at, let's call it like 570,000. So you might save yourself, I don't know, 60K, something like that for two trades. I just think stick with Burton. stick with Burton. Like, he's not playing bad in real life necessarily, and it's going to start to convert for fantasy if the Dogs keep playing well. And he's just got such a soft matchup this week. Tigers don't have John Bateman or Isaiya in those edge back row spots, and they've got new combos in the center spots as well. They've got Talau out now. Like, there is a situation where Matt Burton goes 100 plus this week against the Tigers, and you look just so silly and really hate yourself for trading him out. So keep Burton this week and just stick with it. Just stick with it. But if you do trade him and he bombs all year, then yeah, congratulations. Last group here is our sells. So the guys I've given up on personally. Most of these guys are guys I don't have, but a few of them I do. So Brandon Smith first up here. I was calling him a hold last week because I do believe in the Roosters getting it together. It's just been back-to-back weeks of injuries and challenges. He had that concussion in round 1. The Roosters were really bad against the Dolphins. Round 2, he has that rib injury. There was talk of a lower back injury. Apparently, that's going to plague him going forward. They also have the bye in round 4. Maybe he gets right in that situation. But I just think at $531,000, for a guy that you're not going to be able to start because you just can't trust him, especially with these injuries. And rib injuries too, they've been known to correlate with poor performances. You have to get rid of Brandon Smith at this point. So I'm going to be getting rid of Brandon Smith. But look, I'm open to hear comments on whether you think he's a keep. I don't know if I'd even buy him back with the injury there, unless we saw something out of the buy from him. Jackson Ford's next, and this is really controversial. Personally, I'm not a Ford truther. I really don't believe in Jackson Ford as a fantasy option, which is a real minority position to take. But I just think Josh Curran's there and Mitch Barnett's there, and they're both nipping at his heels for those edge minutes. And you just Curran's really good. Curran's a really good player. He seems to be off out of favor at the Warriors right now, but I just think those guys are going to eat minutes. And Jackson Ford had that concussion. He misses this week. If the Warriors play well and those guys play well, it's not guaranteed that Ford comes back in and takes that spot. Like, he's not that much of a solid starter. He is rated by the Warriors, though, so don't let me persuade you. If you think that Ford's that guy, keep Ford. But I don't think he's that guy. I don't think he's guaranteed big minutes. And I think there are situations where the Warriors may struggle at certain times and Ford will be moved out because the rest of their forward pack is really, really solid. Next up, Ilias. He was our trap of the week for last week. He's at 505,000. He scored, mid-20s as Ilias does most weeks. Send him packing. 505,000. You could free up 200,000 and go get Jahrome Hughes. If you could free up 200,000, maybe going, I don't know, you got Brandon Smith, you got Ilias, Brandon Smith to one of the cheapies we talked about, Ilias up to Jahrome Hughes. That's a great sort of pair of trades there. Or you could potentially do, instead of, if you got halves already, look at Tohu Harris. Look at some of these other pods we talked about. Next up, and this is a question, Nathan Cleary, sell. There are arguments both directions. So Cleary is going into a bye right now. He had an injury last week. It doesn't seem to be that serious. The only thing that is worrying me about Cleary, though, is that Penrith's attack has been really, really bad. They've scored a lot of tries off fluke plays. They haven't scored above, I think it's 16 points this year. Even in the trials, they were looking a little shonky too. Like, you lose Coruscant, you lose Kickow, you lose Taylor May. Cleary is still that guy for fantasy, and you're gonna have to get Cleary back at some point. But at $905,000, it could work for your team to trade him right now. So it could be a case of, let's say you have Brandon Smith and Nathan Cleary, and the rest of your team is perfect. You go those two guys out, you've got about 1.45 million to spend. So say 725,000 each. So you have a bit of money in the bank. You go get Tohu Harris and Pat Carrigan. You go get Jahrome Hughes and Pat Carrigan. Some sort of combo like that, and you're just looking like you're in a much better spot than holding Cleary and having Brandon Smith or something like that. So there are situations where you sell Cleary, but if your team has other problems, then hold Cleary and just ride the pod because he may become a pod for you. Last guy here, and to finish the video on the sells, is Tanah Boyd. There are situations where this could work, where he could bounce back, and at $472,000, it's not absurdly expensive for him to do that. He's averaged brilliantly in the halves before in fantasy, but He looked really bad last week, and he had a lot of negatives in terms of missed tackles, errors, that kind of thing. And there are situations where he may be dropped this week. So Sexton's on that extended bench. He could be the scapegoat for the Titans. I don't think he's going to get dropped. I think they've done the full preseason with him there, but another bad performance, and he's probably dropped. And do you want to start him? Like, I'm looking at him. Do you want to start Tanah Boyd in your 17 this week? I think that question should answer it for you. So do you want to start Tanah Boyd against the Storm? If you don't want to start him, I don't think you've got enough guys on your bench, like in that bottom section, that are going to be worth starting. And you can trade him out for 72,000. It's not, again, we're talking about, Jahrome Hughes a lot, but that's $230,000 away from Jahrome Hughes. So there are situations where that works, or you downgrade him to Katoa, downgrade him to someone else there too. I mean, I would be moving him on. Look, that's our fantasy, preview of the week. So buys, holds, sells, our pods, and different cash cows there. So drop a note in the comments of what trades you're thinking of this week, who you're thinking of captaining, any questions you have for fantasy, and we'll be sure to answer them soon. Anyway, see you.